Mr. Schumer. Mr. Schumer, aye. Ms. Stabenow. Ms. Stabenow, aye. Mr. Cochran. Mr. Cochran, no. Mr. Shelby. Mr. Shelby, no. Mr. Coons. Mr. Coons, aye. Ms. Klobuchar. Ms. Klobuchar, aye. Mr. Rubio. Mr. Rubio, no. Mr. Brown. Mr. Brown of Ohio, aye. Mr. Hoeven. Mr. Hoeven, no. Mr. Merkley. Mr. Merkley, aye. Ms. Cantwell. Ms. Cantwell, aye. Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee, no. Mrs. Boxer. Mrs. Boxer, aye. Mr. Bozeman. Mr. Bozeman, no. Mr. Kirk, no. Mr. Moran. Mr. Moran, no. Mr. Akaka. Mr. Akaka, aye. Mrs. McCaskill. Mrs. McCaskill, aye. Mr. Kyle. Mr. Kyle, no. Mr. Bennett. Mr. Bennett, aye. Ms. Mikulski. Ms. Mikulski, aye. Mr. Udall. Mr. Udall of New Mexico, aye. Mr. Portman. Mr. Portman, no. Mr. Thune. Mr. Thune, no. Mr. Toomey. Mr. Toomey, no. Mr. Carey. Mr. Carey, aye. Mr. Nelson. Mr. Nelson of Florida, aye. Mr. Hatch. Mr. Hatch, no. Mr. Baucus. Mr. Baucus, aye. Mrs. Feinstein. Mrs. Feinstein, aye. Mr. Lautenberg. Mr. Lautenberg, aye. Mr. Carper. Mr. Carper, aye. Ms. Murkowski. Ms. Murkowski, no. Mr. Udall. Mr. Udall of Colorado, aye. Mr. Chambliss. Mr. Chambliss, no. Mr. Dement. Mr. Dement, no. Mr. Reed. Mr. Reed of Nevada, aye. Mrs. Gillibrand. Mrs. Gillibrand, aye.
right. That's right.
Mr. McCain. Mr. McCain, no. Mr. Wicker. No. Mr. Wicker, no. Mr. Sessions. Mr. Sessions, no. Mr. Levin. Mr. Levin, aye. Mr. Reed. Mr. Reed of Rhode Island, aye. Mrs. Hagan. Mrs. Hagan, aye. Mr. Begich. Mr. Begich, no. Mrs. Shaheen, aye. Mr. Lieberman. Mr. Lieberman, aye.
Are there any senators wishing to vote or to change a vote? If not, on this vote, the yeas are 52, the nays are 48. Under the previous order requiring 60 votes for the adoption of this motion, the motion is withdrawn.
Mr. President.
The Majority Leader.
Several years ago, we faced a confirmation.
Majority Leader would suspend. The Senate will be in order.
Thank you, Mr. President. Several years ago, we faced a confirmation crisis here in the United States Senate. The majority at the time, the Republicans, were frustrated with the inefficient way the Senate was performing our constitutional duty of confirming presidential nominees. Many of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle passionately argued that all judicial nominees deserve an up or down vote on the Senate floor. In their frustration, they threatened to dramatically change the purpose of the Senate and the minority protections for which it was designed. That would have, in a manner of speaking, blown up the institution. That's why it was known as the nuclear option. In the heat of this battle, several courageous senators, Democrats and Republicans, agreed to a standard that would preserve the...
Senator, if the Senator will suspend, the Assistant Majority Leader is right. The Senate is not in order. Senators will take their conversations off the floor so the Majority Leader can be heard. Majority Leader.
In the heat of that battle, several courageous senators, both Democrats and Republicans, agreed to a standard that would preserve the traditions of this great body, the United States Senate. They ensured the Senate could still provide the President's advice and consent as the Constitution requires. The agreement was significant but very simple. It was this: except in extraordinary circumstances, those nominated to be federal judges would get an up or down vote. The minority would not stand in the way of that vote. The agreement was grounded in common sense. So far, in most cases, both sides have generally upheld that agreement. The nomination before us, however, is not one of those cases. And that is I will file cloture shortly on the nomination of Goodwin Liu. Goodwin Liu is an extremely well-qualified public servant and really an impressive legal scholar. He was a Rhodes Scholar, clerk to the United States Supreme Court, which is something that just a small percentage of graduates from law school have the opportunity to do. That is to be a Supreme Court clerk. Goodwin Liu served as an associate dean at the California Berkeley School of Law and is now a professor there. He has done a significant amount of pro bono work. He even helped launch AmeriCorps. On top of that, he's lived the American dream. He's the highly successful son of immigrants. I think President Obama was wise to appoint him to the Ninth Circuit. So do a lot of Democrats, and so do a lot of Republicans. Ken Starr, infamous as far as Democrats go, the former White House special prosecutor. Cole Liu, who served in the Clinton administration, quote, a person of great intellect, accomplishment, and integrity, end of quote. Former Republican Congressman Bob Barr, an extremely conservative former federal prosecutor, also reviewed Liu's writings. He came away impressed with, as he said, quote, his commitment to the Constitution and to a fair criminal justice system, end of quote. And one of President Bush's former White House lawyers said, Liu's views, quote, fall well within the legal mainstream. I could go on with more quotes from lawyers and legislators on the right, the left, and independents. But you get the picture. Right, left, center. They think very highly of this good man. Everyone agrees that Goodwin Liu's nomination is far from the extraordinary circumstance that would warrant a filibuster. The only extraordinary things about Liu are his experience, his accomplishments, and his integrity. He should be confirmed. At the very least, he should undoubtedly deserve an up or down vote. But Senate Republicans have already forgotten the lesson of the nuclear option. Today, they're threatening to block this highly qualified nominee from confirmation. Vacancies on the federal bench delay justice for citizens seeking help of our judicial system, and it isn't fair to leave in limbo well-qualified nominees. So I'm forced now to file cloture in order to ensure Goodwin Liu gets the vote he deserves. It's regrettable that it's come to this. As I file cloture, I remind my Republican colleagues once again that public servants are not political pawns. Goodwin Liu has dedicated his life to justice and fairness. As we consider his nomination, we owe someone of his caliber those same considerations. So, Mr. President, I ask consent to proceed to executive session and calendar number 80, the nomination of Goodwin Liu of California to be a United States Circuit Judge for the Ninth Circuit.
Is there objection? Without objection, the clerk will report.
Nomination, Goodwin Liu of California to be United States Circuit Judge.
I send a cloture motion to the desk with respect to the Liu nomination. Is it at the desk? Thank you.
The clerk will report the motion.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, in accordance with provisions of Rule 22 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, hereby move to bring to a close the debate on the nomination of Goodwin Liu of California to be United States Circuit Judge for the Ninth Circuit, signed by 17 senators as follows: Reed of Nevada, Leahy, Schumer, Blumenthal, Akaka, Franken, Durbin, Whitehouse, Feinstein, Merkley, Coons, Beckidge, Klobuchar, Boxer, Reed of Rhode Island, Stabenow, and Brown of Ohio.
I ask unanimous consent the mandatory quorum under Rule 22 be waived.
Without objection.
Mr. President, I also ask unanimous consent the Senate resume legislative session and proceed to a period of morning business for debate only, with senators permitted to speak for up to 10 minutes each.
Without objection. The senator from Ohio is recognized.
Mr. President, thank you. Yesterday, the White House announced that it will not submit 3 pending free trade agreements, the FTAs, with South Korea, Colombia, and Panama until Congress reaches a deal on reauthorizing the trade adjustment assistance for workers program, the so-called TAA. I applaud President Obama for putting workers first before we do these trade agreements. The trade agreements are very controversial, as they always are. The promises are always that they will create jobs, and they rarely do. They usually result in a net decrease in jobs. Yet, too often, Congress jettisons the safety net to protect those workers who lose their jobs because of these agreements. That's why I applaud President Obama for making this point clear. He will not send these trade agreements to Congress until Congress has sent to his desk, not talked about it, not debated it, not passed one committee or one House, but sent to his desk trade adjustment assistance expansion. As my colleagues know, since we let this program expire in February because of Republican objections, Senator Casey and I went to the floor day after day after day in December, finally, and then again in February, as Republicans continued to object to continue trade adjustment assistance as we had begun in the Recovery Act 2 years earlier. So what happened, because of these Republican objections, we shut out service workers and we shut out manufacturing workers who had lost their jobs to countries with which we do not have a free trade agreement. So when workers lost their jobs because of outsourcing of jobs to China or India, those workers couldn't get trade adjustment assistance until the Recovery Act, and so they could get it in 2009, in 2010. Because of Republican objections to continuation of that, they can't get it now. Also, service workers, people who lost their jobs that were in the service industries, experienced the same kind of the same kind of deadline on their eligibility. Since Congress made reforms to TAA in 2009, more than 185,000 additional trade-affected workers became eligible for training under the TAA for Workers program. In 2010 alone, more than 227,000 workers participated in TAA, receiving training for jobs that employers are looking to fill. These are people that receiving training for jobs that employers are looking to fill. These are people that want to work, they lost their jobs because of a trade agreement, they can prove they lost their jobs because of a trade agreement. A company shuts down in Elyria, Ohio and goes to Mexico. A company shuts down in Steubenville, Ohio and goes to New Delhi. A company shuts down in Lima, Ohio and goes to Shanghai. When you can prove that, as you can in many, many cases, those workers should be eligible for assistance from the government to get trained, to get back to work. The program also, of course, receives strong support from businesses who know that a skilled workforce is critical to their economic competitiveness. But just 11 days ago, because of these Republican objections and because the TAA language was truncated, but just 11 days ago, the Labor Department denied the first 3 petitions filed by groups of workers asking TAA and assistance under pre-2009 TAA rules, including 3 workers in Uniontown, Ohio. The reason they are service workers. In addition, the Enhanced Health Coverage Tax Credit Program also expired in February. HCTC helps trade-affected workers purchase private health insurance coverage to replace the employer-sponsored coverage they lost. Helps those retirees who lose their benefits when the company for which they work goes bankrupt. The HCTC prevents tens of thousands of Americans from falling into the ranks of the uninsured. But right now, if we don't act, we're simply giving these workers the cold shoulder. So I applaud the administration for saying yesterday we will pass no more free trade agreements without a deal on TAA. But this will require my Republican colleagues to come to the table and agree on a package. We've seen what unfair trade deals like NAFTA and PNTR with China and CAFTA do to communities in Ohio and around the nation. These are Americans who lost their jobs, they lost their pensions, they lost their health care, maybe all 3, when the company they work for moved operations overseas or went to bankruptcy court or faced a reduction in demand for their products due to unfair foreign competition. These Americans need TAA to get back on solid footing. These Americans need Congress to defend against unfair trade and to strengthen trade enforcement. There are several trade enforcement measures that Senator McCaskill and Senator Wyden and I and others that we've introduced, and I hope they'll garner bipartisan support in this chamber. Senator Blunt, Senator McCaskill, and I testified in front of the subcommittee, the trade subcommittee that Senator Wyden chaired the other day, and talked about some of these ideas and how to address them bipartisanly. TAA has been a core pillar of U.S. trade policy. It's long enjoyed bipartisan support because it helps American workers who lose their jobs and their financial security as a result of globalization. I thank Senator Casey and Senator Stabenow Senator Baucus and Senator Wyden for their leadership on trade adjustment assistance language in getting this legislation put forward. Mr. President, just the fairness of this. Again, put yourself, something we don't do enough here, put yourself in the shoes of a worker in Champaign, Illinois, or in Boulder, Colorado, or in Mansfield, Ohio, a worker who showed up at work for 15 years, been a productive worker, helped his company make money, paid a middle-class decent wage, and then all of a sudden their plant shuts down because the jobs are outsourced to China. They didn't do anything wrong. Are we going to do nothing to help them? Are we going to do nothing to help their communities? It's pretty clear to me, overwhelming consensus of the American people say, give them the opportunity to get training for another job if we can't save their jobs. Give them the health insurance, some assistance on health insurance, so they can reach into their pocket with some assistance through a significant tax credit to continue the insurance for their families. It will mean many of them will not lose their homes. Far too many people who lose their jobs, then lose their health insurance, lose their homes. And we have an opportunity to actually do something about this, Mr. President. So the President was exactly right. Don't bring these 3 free trade agreements with Colombia, with Panama, and with South Korea to the floor until we've taken care of the workers who lose their jobs first. Not at the same time, because we know what happens when we try to do that. All of a sudden, the assistance for workers gets jettisoned. But it must be done first to help these workers with their health insurance, with their training, retraining. It will matter for literally hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of American families. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
System Majority Leader.
Mr. President, I ask consent to speak as if in morning business.
Without objection.
Mr. President, first let me salute my colleague from Ohio for bringing up trade adjustment assistance, because even if you're a proponent of expanding trade in the United States, you know that the ebb and flow of the economy is going to take away some jobs in this country as other suppliers arrive. And what the Senator from Ohio and the Senator from Oregon, Ron Wyden, are trying to achieve is to make sure that trade adjustment assistance is there to help these workers make a transition to another job in another area that is expanding in our economy. That is the thoughtful thing to do for their lives and the future of our economy. And it's also a necessary part of any conversation about the future of trade in the United States. Mr. President, I rise to speak about the effect of interchange fee reform on small banks and credit unions. Interchange fees are not well known by most Americans. They're known as swipe fees or interchange fees, and they reflect the amount of money that is paid to a bank each time you use that bank's credit or debit card. You don't know it as a consumer that you're being charged extra when you buy something at a store if you use plastic, but that fee is being paid to the bank every time you swipe the card. Who establishes that fee? Well, you would assume that the bank does, but it's not so. The fee that is charged every time you swipe a card is established by the credit card companies. The big giants, Visa and MasterCard, decide exactly how much that fee will be. And you ask yourself, well, then what voice does a merchant or retailer have in how much that fee is going to be on each transaction? And the answer is virtually no voice. It is a price-fixing mechanism where Visa and MasterCard and the major credit card companies establish the interchange or swipe fee to be paid to each bank, credit union, or financial institution that issues the credit or debit card. It's a lot of money. Each month in America, just on debit cards now, each month in America, they collect about $1.3 billion in transactions where people use debit cards. Now remember, a debit card is like your checking account. You're drawing money directly out of your checking account to pay the merchant where you're doing business. It isn't like a credit card, where in fact they have to collect the money from you later on. This is a situation where the money is taken directly out of your bank account. And you would think, as with the use of checks in the old economy, that this would be a low-cost transaction, and it should be. It used to be banks would process checks written to pay a restaurant or a department store, charging pennies on the transaction, not a percentage of the transaction. Well, the Federal Reserve took a look at what's being charged for debit cards, where the money comes right out of your account. Turns out the average is about 40 cents a transaction. We asked them, well, what is the reasonable amount that should be charged if you're going to take into account exactly how much it cost a bank to process a debit card transaction. They said it was closer to 10 cents or 12 cents. So merchants and retailers across America on every single transaction involving a debit card are paying an inflated amount of swipe fee or interchange fee, and most of those fees go to the largest banks in America. You see, almost 60% of all the debit card transactions really focus on three major banks. That would be Bank of America, Wells Fargo, and Chase. And so there's a lot of money to be made in this business as long as they're using the debit cards and getting the swipe fees. We put in a new law last year which said the Federal Reserve should establish what is a reasonable and proportional amount to be charged for the interchange fee for debit cards. As I told you, the initial investigation suggested it's around 10 cents, and the actual charge is 40 cents. Now, these banks that are about to lose these major interchange fee receipts are very upset about it, because as of July the 21st, the new rule will go into effect, which will bring the fee down to a reasonable and proportional level. And so they are fighting this with tooth and nail. Today I was at a breakfast here on Capitol Hill, and a group of lobbyists were there, and one came up to me and said, "Durbin, your fight on the interchange fee has more lobbyists working in Washington than any other issue, on both sides of the issue." And I said, "I understand that. That wasn't my goal. My goal is really to help the merchants and retailers and the consumers." You see, when the retailers are in a competitive atmosphere, if it's one gas station across the street from another, then saving 30 cents on a transaction can really be part of a decision by a retailer to lower prices to become more price competitive in a competitive free market atmosphere. That's what I'm looking for. I want the consumers to be the ultimate winners. I want retailers and merchants to be treated fairly. Incidentally, for the record, what is the debit card interchange fee charged by Visa and MasterCard issuing banks in Canada? It's zero. Zero. There is no interchange fee in Canada because the government there said, "We're not going to stand for this. You're really ripping off merchants, retailers, and consumers. We won't let you do it." Same thing happened in Europe, where they brought down the interchange fees to dramatically low levels. Well, in the United States, the battle's on. And if you had to pick a group with the lowest level of credibility when it comes to this institution or Congress, maybe even the American people, I guess next to politicians, you'd have to say big banks, particularly the big banks that were bailed out by our federal government when they made a mess of things a few years back. So the big banks that issue the debit cards can't come in here and lobby for themselves. The credit card companies themselves don't enjoy a very good reputation here either. Consumers know what a tough time it is to pay those bills off and the fine print that they have to deal with in their contracts. So what these groups have done, the credit card companies and big banks, is to enlist small banks and credit unions to come and appeal to us, saying we're in your city and community and the Durbin Amendment can hurt us. What they don't say is that the law that we passed specifically exempts all banks and credit unions with a valuation of lower than $10 billion. $10 billion. So of the 7,000 or 8,000 credit unions in America, how many have a valuation over $10 billion? 3. How many banks out of the 7,000 or 8,000 have a valuation over $10 billion? Less than 100. So we're talking about 100 institutions here who will be affected by this law, and the others are exempt. I rise to speak about the effect of this interchange fee reform on these small banks and credit unions. Recently, the banking industry and some bank regulators have claimed that the small issuer exemption, $10 billion exemption, in last year's reform law may not work. The banking industry people said there are market forces that could undermine it. They're wrong. I respect their right to speculate on what might happen when reform takes place, but in response, I point out that they simply have not provided any evidence to back up their claims. In fact, all the hard evidence about the interchange systems leads to the opposite conclusion. Interchange reform will give small banks and credit unions competitive advantages against the bigger banks. This isn't just my conclusion. It's a conclusion of a prominent economist and industry analyst like Andrew Carr, whose Frontline program profiled as the creators of the modern card industry, plastic card industry. And former IMF chief economist Simon Johnson, in a recent online survey, even 60% of American bankers' subscription-paying readers agreed that interchange reform will help small banks. So the members who come to the floor and say, oh, this terrible rule change that exempts banks with less than $10 billion in assets is going to hurt them, they're not only wrong on the facts, they're wrong in public opinion. The key point to remember here is that the debit interchange system isn't a properly functioning market. The interchange system has been designed in a way so normal market forces don't apply. No transparency, no competition. Last year, a bipartisan majority of my colleagues recognized that reform needed to take place, and after years of studies and hearings, it became clear the interchange system was not going to cure itself. It was broken and unfair. The system was structured to avoid competitive market forces. Andrew Martin of the New York Times summarized the debit interchange system in a January 2010 expose. Here's what he said. Competition, of course, usually forces prices lower. But for payment networks like Visa and MasterCard, competition in the card business is more about winning over banks than actually issuing the cards that consumers who use them. Visa and MasterCard set the fees that merchants must pay the cardholder's bank. And higher fees mean higher profits for the banks, even if it means that the merchants and retailers have to shift the cost to consumers. Martin went on to quote Ronald Congemi, C-O-N-G-E-M-I. I apologize if I mispronounced his name. He's the former CEO of the Star Debit Network, who talked about his network's struggle to compete with Visa. Mr. Congemi said, what we witnessed was truly a perverse form of competition. They competed on the basis of raising prices. What other industry do you know gets away with that? James Miller, former director of OMB, chairman of the Federal Trade Commission under President Ronald Reagan, elaborated on this in a recent op-ed article entitled, "The Debit Card Market is Broken and Needs Fixing Now." Here's what he wrote. Under this dysfunctional system, the network's competitive incentives are to raise fees rather than to reduce them. One network raises its fees higher than the other to encourage banks to issue their cards. Then, soon after, the other network raises its fees for the same reason. The result is rapidly escalating fees. This broken system would not survive were it not for the fact that Visa and MasterCard represent a combined 90% of the debit market. Merchants are powerless to negotiate and can't take their business elsewhere, so they're left with no choice but to pay these fees. In short, interchange is an abnormal market which has no naturally occurring market force to hold fees in check. Visa and MasterCard want as many of their debit cards to be swiped as possible. That's how they make their money. By raising interchange rates that merchants must pay to banks, the card companies entice banks to issue more cards. Merchants can't refuse Visa and MasterCard. They can't negotiate them with, so they're stuck with what they have to pay. Last year, Congress decided that we no longer simply trust Visa and MasterCard to fix interchange fees however they want. We agreed there should be reasonable constraints placed on the card networks to prevent them from using their market dominance to set unreasonably high fees on behalf of the nation's biggest banks. We passed a law that said when Visa and MasterCard fix fee rates on behalf of banks with over $10 billion in assets, the rates, according to the Federal Reserve, must be reasonable and proportional to the amount it actually costs the banks to process the transaction. Congress didn't have the information about how much it actually cost big banks to process transactions. The banks always kept that secret, even from the General Accounting Office. So we directed the Federal Reserve to gather the information on the cost, put out a rule implementing the reasonable proportional standard. That's underway right now. The Federal Reserve believes that they'll report this rule toward the first part of June, and it'll go in effect July the 21st. Now, when it comes to small issuers, we've said they're exempt. This means Visa and MasterCard can continue to fix interchange rates on behalf of small banks and credit unions in an unregulated environment like they do today. It's status quo for them. Now, some people might say, well, why would you let the credit unions and small community banks charge a higher rate to swipe the debit card than the big banks? You can make that argument, that if you're going to protect consumers at every level, it should affect every institution. But we specifically exempted community banks and credit unions with valuations below $10 billion believing that those community banks deserve a break and a helping hand. They're not showing much gratitude for that exemption. Visa and MasterCard have no incentive to voluntarily lower fee rates for small issuers. Remember, in the interchange market, Visa and MasterCard compete to raise fees to win bank business. They want to have high fees so banks issue more cards. If MasterCard decides to voluntarily lower its small bank rates, those banks are going to jump over and start issuing Visa cards. Does that make sense for either of these two credit card giants? Of course not. So why would the small issuer exemption work? This is where some creative arguments have come into play from those who say it won't. I want to respond to these arguments that I've heard. First, the claim's been made card networks will not maintain separate tiers of interchange rates for big regulated issuers and smaller issuers. The facts don't support it. Visa, the dominant network, announced in January it would in fact operate a two-tier system, exactly the opposite of what all the lobbyists for community banks and credit unions are saying on Capitol Hill. Visa has said they will respect the interchange fees from the smaller issuers. Other smaller debit networks have made the same announcement. The only company that hasn't is MasterCard, and they are expected to. Sure, the law doesn't require them to operate two-tier systems, but the card networks will lose money if they don't. If networks want small banks to issue their debit cards, they have to offer interchange at rate levels the small banks will be attracted to. Second argument, the American Bankers Association claimed last week that, quote, having two different prices for exactly the same product, transaction processing, is not sustainable in a competitive marketplace, end of quote. But there's clear evidence to the contrary. Look at the current credit card market. According to GAO, in 2009, Visa had 60 different credit card interchange prices. MasterCard had 243. Different fee structure for different cards issued by different banks. A merchant that accepts Visa or MasterCard credit cards might be charged any number of different interchange fees depending on whether it's a consumer or corporate card, and the type of rewards program. If you have one of these frequent flyer cards, there may be a higher interchange fee that's going to be charged to the company, to the retailer, where they accept your card. From the merchant's standpoint, they treat it as exactly the same product. It's a credit card. But there are many different interchange prices that the merchant might get charged. Visa and MasterCard have sustained this multi-tiered pricing structure for years. The American Bankers Association has to know that. Why would they state exactly the opposite? Well, because their biggest banks are the ones who are going to lose out if the consumers prosper under this new change. How have they been able to do it? These card companies, remember, the interchange system is not a normal competitive market. In this case, card networks impose rules on every merchant that require merchants to accept every card with a network logo on it. It means if you're running a store in Springfield, Illinois, or Denver, Colorado, and somebody shows up with a Visa card, you have signed a contract that says, I honor every card with Visa emblazoned on it put on the counter. Even though I pay a higher interchange fee as a retailer, if it's a big card with frequent flyer miles and bonus and all the rest of it, you got to take it. That's the law. That's the contract law that binds these merchants. Third, the American Bankers Association has claimed that if big bank debit fees are reduced, merchants will discriminate and find some way to get customers to use big bank debit cards instead of small issuer cards. If this claim were true, we would surely see some evidence of it today because of multi-tier pricing in credit card interchange. Let me give you an example. For supermarkets, a Visa credit card with no rewards program currently carries an interchange fee of 1.15%. More than 1% of what you purchase. That's the interchange fee if it's a simple Visa credit card, no rewards. But a Visa Signature Preferred Rewards credit card has an interchange fee of almost twice that, 2.1%. By the ABA's logic, supermarkets right now would be discriminating against rewards cards and steering customers to non-rewards cards. No evidence of that discrimination anywhere. I challenge the American Bankers Association, put up or shut up. If you've got some evidence to the contrary, let's see it. If you don't, retract the specious claim. Why don't merchants discriminate? The merchant community sent me a letter a few weeks ago explaining in detail how they lack the contractual authority to do it, the practical ability, and the economic incentive to discriminate. I also want to add a common sense point. Most Americans only have one debit card. If a merchant tells a customer not to use his debit card because it was issued by a small bank, the customer would likely do one of two things: not make the purchase at all or pay with a credit card. Credit cards carry much higher interchange fees than debit cards. How then would discriminating against debit cards be in a merchant's interest? And I want to tell you, when I talk to the merchants, I've got Wendy Chronister, who runs a series or a whole slew of gas stations in Central Illinois, took the business over from her dad. She's a great young woman, executive, and she said, "Senator, they put the plastic on the counter, we take it. If it clears, we've got the transaction, move on to the next customer. We are not going to debate how many other credit cards you're carrying and where's the one with the lower interchange fee. We don't have time for it, and we're not going to put that kind of hassle on our customers." Fourth, some make the argument that the non-exclusivity provision of the reform law will cause small issuer exchange rates to go down. This non-exclusivity provision is often misunderstood. Until recent years, nearly all debit cards were set up by banks so that transactions could be run over one of multiple debit networks. But in recent years, the dominant networks, particularly Visa, have formed exclusive deals with big banks so that transactions on their debit cards could only be run by one network. What they're trying to do, credit card companies are trying to do, is to monopolize the transactions as well as the cards. These exclusivity agreements are threatening to drive smaller debit networks out of business. This trend hurts competition and creates real barriers to entry for new networks. All the non-exclusivity provision in the new law says is that banks have to pick at least 2 unaffiliated card networks to enable on each debit card, and merchants get to choose which network they want. You know what? I want to say to my friends at the Wall Street Journal who write editorials saying what a bad idea interchange reform is, what we're talking about here is something called competition. For the biggest business newspaper in the United States, you'd think they would support something like this. Non-exclusivity is not new. Last month, the Pulse Network released its annual survey of debit card issuers. Pulse said that when it comes to this non-exclusivity requirement, many issuers are already complying, and we haven't seen any small bank interchange rates decline as a result. It's another smokescreen red herring. The non-exclusivity provision gives the Fed broad discretion to lay out guidelines to make it work effectively. The Fed also gets to choose the effective date. In short, this provision is not the bogeyman that some have made it out to be. It's simply a safeguard to ensure that Visa doesn't become the only debit network left in the market. What I've learned after years of working on this complicated issue is the following. Banks and credit unions will consistently oppose any type of reform. The American Bankers Association is legendary. It represents the banking industry, and Credit Union National Association, which represents the credit unions, both have statements on their website making it clear that there is no regulation of the interchange system they'll support. Senator Kit Bond of Missouri, now retired, and I tried to negotiate with the banks and credit unions in 2009 when we were thinking about doing an amendment to allow for greater interchange transparency and debit discounts. The banks and credit unions blasted a letter of opposition out before we even drafted the amendment. And now the opponents of my amendment say what we need is 30 months to study this. Study it for what? I know where it's going to end up. We've been through this before. I've seen this movie. The American Banking Association, Bankers Association, and the National Credit Union Association, now marching in lockstep on issues, are going to oppose any reform. The entire financial industry is making a killing under the current interchange system to the tune of $1.3 billion a month. Do the math and figure out why this has every lobbyist in town working to defeat the Durbin Amendment. 30 times 1.3. That's pretty close to $40 billion that's at stake here if the amendment to stop this Durbin change in the interchange fee system goes through. Well, the change needs to go through. There's widespread consensus that we need to reform interchange system to rein in Visa, MasterCards, and the biggest banks on Wall Street. I don't think anybody disagrees with that. In fact, I've seen polling across this country in every state from virtually every political group, left, right, and center, where they overwhelmingly support interchange fee reform. The credit unions and community banks are selling a story which the public isn't buying. In carrying out this reform, I've bent over backwards to try to address small issuer concerns. I don't want small banks and credit unions forced out of the debit card market. That's why we exempted them. I want consumers to be able to bank at these institutions and use debit cards. I've tried to protect small banks and credit unions, even though they've made it clear they don't support any regulation of the system, and even though they've fought me every step of the way. By exempting small issuers from fee regulation, we've left intact an interchange system that has worked quite well for small issuers and is almost certain to continue to work well. But let's be clear, there's only one way we can provide these small issuers with an absolute 100% guarantee that Visa and MasterCard will give them interchange rates they like. There's only one way to do it. That would be to regulate the rates that Visa and MasterCard fix for small issuers and make sure they're appropriate. I'm happy to explore that, but I can already tell you the small issuers are going to push back on that immediately. They want their cake and they want to eat it too. They want no regulation. They want to be able to charge interchange fees that reach the heavens, and they don't care what happens to the merchants, retailers, or consumers. I think we took care of those small issuers in last year's law. If they've got some suggestions on how to give them more assurance that Visa and MasterCard won't set rates at unsustainable levels, I'm listening. But make no mistake, I will not support any delay or repeal of the overall interchange rulemaking because this will let the big banks and card networks off the hook. We are very close to finally reining in the abusive interchange system and providing help to consumers and merchants. We can't let the big banks and card companies avoid accountability yet again. They already get away with too much. Closing, I strongly believe we need interchange reform. We need to bring fairness, competition, and transparency to a broken debit system. I'll work hard to make sure this reform happens and happens soon, and I would think the fact that the opponents to my amendment are trying to stop it before the Fed even issues a rule is an indication they don't even want to see what the rule looks like. Why? $1.3 billion a month. That's why. Change is going to cost the big banks big money, and that's why the credit card companies, the banks on Wall Street are fighting it. I've always tried to approach this issue in a reasonable way, focusing on the facts. I'm always happy to engage with others who share this approach, even if they disagree with me. Mr. President, I yield the floor. President, I ask unanimous consent. The Senate now proceed with consideration of Senate Resolution 186 submitted earlier today.
The clerk